Hello and welcome to Making Media Now, the Filmmakers Collaborative podcast. I'm your host, Michael Azevedo. Although it may be hard to detect, a quiet revolution is underway. As the real-world consequences of social media come into focus and AI's invasion into every aspect of our lives feels imminent, a new generation of parents and teens are stepping forward to challenge the systems shaping their lives and to fight for a different future, one where big tech doesn't get to define the terms of human connection. Joining me on this episode are director SARA ROBIN and writer Jack LEMAY to discuss their documentary, Your Attention Please. Blending intimate human stories with insights from leading experts in tech reform and digital well-being, Your Attention Please asks some of the most urgent questions of our time. Can we reclaim our autonomy? Can technology be redesigned to serve humanity? And what does a healthier relationship with the digital world look like for us and our kids? Here's the trailer.
Do you remember the world before cell phones?
Super light question. Creativity, being present, human relationships with our friends and family.
I was assigned the letter K for kindness.
Exactly that is what we're gonna lose.
Toxic content has been at the core of their business model.
Carson was tormented by a group of his peers.
I am testifying here today to bring a face to the harms occurring every day from the unchecked power of the social media industry.
Frances Haugen,
a Facebook whistleblower.
Facebook's own research says they end up in this feedback cycle where they hate their bodies more and more.
Big tech, they know exactly what they're doing. Quick hits.
Hey there. The future of entertainment is here.
We're being domesticated to be maximally harvestable for the attention-based business model.
There's no accountability.
Have you apologized to the victims?
It is pulling us away from these deep instincts for what makes a life well lived.
Although we're more connected than ever with anyone around the world, we're less connected with the people we're actually with.
Those might seem like small moments. Turns out that's all part of what makes us human.
The Offline Club drew big crowds in London
as they dared to stand for their right to disconnect.
I came forward at great personal risk because I believe we still have time to act. But we must act now.
SARA ROBIN is a German filmmaker based in Boston. Her work explores human connection, often through the lens of future worlds, and is known for telling stories at the intersection of documentary and science fiction. Jack LeMay is a writer and director and editor, also based in Boston. His films are observational and philosophical and explore the poetry of what drives the human spirit. Making Media Now is sponsored by Filmmakers Collaborative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting media makers from across the creative spectrum. From providing fiscal sponsorship to presenting an array of informative and educational programs, Filmmakers Collaborative supports creatives at every step in their journey. To learn more, visit filmmakerscollab.org. And if you're enjoying this podcast, which is now available on YouTube as well as on all podcast platforms, please share it with others. Now on to my conversation with SARA ROBIN and Jack LeMay. SARA ROBIN and Jack LeMay, welcome to Making Media Now.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure speaking with you today. We are here to talk about your film, Your Attention Please, which essentially looks at the underpinnings and what's shaping up to be a pushback against the addictive technologies that are infiltrating all of our lives, particularly the lives of younger folks. And we look at that through the guise of the growth of social media platforms, but also the freight train coming down the track that we refer to as AI. So I want to just start off by asking each of you, when the idea came to devote your considerable talents and experience and time to this topic, why this topic and why at this point in history? SARA, maybe you could lead us off with that. And I just want to say, SARA, you are the director of the film. Jack is the editor and the writer and the co-creator of the film.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, for me, it started a while back, actually, all the way back in 2009. Facebook came into my life for the first time, and which was a little later, I think, than maybe for many folks. But I grew up in Germany, so I was a little insulated from it, partially because Germans have, more concerns around data privacy. So we didn't exactly open this welcome this American company with open arms that was basically saying, well, we gather all your information and keep it on our servers forever. That didn't seem like such a good idea to us. So that was a slow uptake. And in 2009, I moved to Australia for my undergrad and came into a friends group where everyone already was on Facebook. And on top of that, the like button had just been released, which made the whole thing a lot more sticky, right? Because now everyone was like, did my crush like my post? Like, how many followers do I have? How many likes did I get on this thing? Should I delete this post because it didn't get enough likes? That was new behavior, this whole like deleting a post after the fact because it wasn't well received enough. And you could kind of feel the way we expressed ourselves online changing. And it changed from like something that resembled a little more a diary entry, I would say, to something that became a bit more like an advertisement of yourself. And I just instantly had a sense I did not like that. I'm a pretty like, I tend to overthink. I'm a quite self-conscious person. So putting all this information out there about myself was something I didn't enjoy. And I was like, I'm not going to get on this thing. And of course, it became culturally more and more relevant as time went on. There was a lot of optimism around it. I was studying politics at the time, and there was so much optimism around what this tool would do for democracy. Obama loved it, so I was kind of in an awkward place speaking out against it. And I thought back then at some point, I want to do something about that. Maybe it'll be a PhD, maybe it'll be a film. I want to talk about how this changes the way we connect with each other. And so the idea was born then, but for many years I didn't pursue it, and partially because the perception of social media was still largely positive, and I felt I was going against the grain, and it just wasn't going to work. And that really changed once The Social Dilemma came out. And I think once the mood also in society shifted, and I think one way in which you can see that is nowadays, you have older generations go, I'm so glad I'm not a kid now.
Right.
That's profound. That always used to be the other way around, right?
Sure.
Like when I grew up, my parents were like, oh, back in the day, you have it easy now. Back in the day, here's what we had to go through. Now that has somehow been shifted on its head.
Right.
And what's even crazier is the young generations kind of agree. They're like, we love these videos from the 90s where people hang out in high school without phones and everyone is like having a great time. So you can tell there's some consensus now around like this is not working for us. And yet there was very little imagination of how it could change and how it could be different.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
really
One of the things that's so interesting about your film, and I think you're dealing with a topic that has been dealt with before. You mentioned the social dilemma, but one of the things I really enjoyed about your film is that you all kind of touch upon and expand upon certain aspects that, when you think about it, they can be very empowering in the sense that, wait a minute, why are we all accepting this as just a fait accompli? Like, this has to be the way it is, particularly when you're talking about a technology that's less than 20 years old, right? There was life before it. We can determine what life, beyond it might be. Mm-hmm. Jack, what about yourself? What about this topic really felt relevant and compelling for you?
Yeah, I'll go back to a similar time to Sarah. For the beginning for me is about 2010, which is when I decided to delete my Facebook. I had been on it for a few years and, similar to Sarah, I kind of felt like this is a strange new world. And it really was the end of my first serious relationship, where now, you're sort of moving forward into your life, but you have this weird digital window where you can go and look at that person and sort of stay in memory land. So I was like, you know what? My parents always talked about when they ended relationships, they had this sort of like, you move on, you go into this next phase of your life. So I went to go delete my Facebook, and it made this last attempt to try to keep me, where I pulled up a photo of me and that person from prom, and it said, this person will miss you, don't go. And that was the absolutely like, get me out of here button. And I think that really, triggered something in my brain where I thought, we're not quite there yet, but this is like giving me a window into where we're headed, into how it's going to start to use our emotional relationships against us in a way, right? To try to lead us along into the outcomes that they would like through our psychological experiences. So cut forward to 2022, we had been in the pandemic for 2 years. I decided to make this crazy choice to go live out of a backpack for 6 months and hike up the west coast of America on the Pacific Crest Trail, which was partially, a desire to get back in my body and feel like a true lived experience again. And it was absolutely wonderful. It was as an amazing thing to live out of a backpack and, sleep under the stars and really get back into the mode of the here and now, meeting strangers, realizing that so much of America, even though, rural folks, I'm a city kid, like rural folks that, vote differently from me, that have such a different background from me, are such rich, amazing people in their content of character, oftentimes that will open their homes. And anyway, so coming back from this experience at the end and sort of crash landing back into our world of digital communication was really a reverse culture shock. And I think, standing on a subway train after the hike and seeing like all the heads looking down at the phones at the same time, nobody making eye contact, there was something so palpable. And like now it wasn't just like a theoretical, like I know this is happening to us. This was more of like a visceral, lived reaction of like, oh, I really don't like the contrast now that I've had the chance to step out of it. And I knew that I really wanted to take all that experience and channel it into something really meaningful to try to engage with this conversation. It was right around that time Sarah had already started the film, and she was looking for an editor to partner with and to really make sense of how do we take something so large and narrow it into a story that really is compelling and has teeth, but still covers the waterfront of all the things we want to say.
So I know you all have been quite active on the festival circuit, particularly of late. Your film played to great acclaim at South by Southwest and more recently at the Boston International Film Festival. I'm curious what type of audiences first were watching your film at these festivals, and what type of feedback are you getting, and has the feedback sort of evolved? Because it almost feels like, as a culture, you're not going to have to do a whole lot of arm twisting to say whatever social media is doing, it's not healthy. So the diagnosis seems like there's kind of cultural buy-in on that. But what to do about it, and who's willing to sort of sacrifice for the betterment of society, right, in order to do that, that's less clear. So tell me a little bit about what kind of feedback you are getting and perhaps some ways that it might have surprised you.
Yeah, great question. I think something we discovered early on, even when we were doing test screenings, doing our edit phase, is that the film resonates with all kinds of different people and in different ways. So, we would get from parents oftentimes, of course, it's a very emotional response that you get, and it's a concerned response. And sometimes the more solutions focused bits almost get missed because the parent story is so intense.
Right.
And so people sometimes leave the film actually more concerned about what they've seen and feeling like they've learned something new that they didn't know about when it comes to social media harms. And that to me was surprising because I thought that it's kind of well documented now. That social media is linked to depression, anxiety, in extreme cases, suicide, eating disorders, drug abuse. Like it's a long list. But turns out, seeing it in a way that we show it in a film firsthand, like putting a face to the story, is very impactful and still starts a lot of conversations around parents that kind of lead to really wanting to double down and educate themselves and change things in their own communities and their own families. So we get some of that response. And then we get a lot of responses to the effect of what you said, that people are really excited about the solutions we're showing. The offline club, offline gatherings. I have so many people coming up to me after screenings being like, where can we sign up to the next, offline club? So there's a desire there to like be part of this and experiment with more phone-free time as well. And Jack, I'm sure you.
Yeah.
things
I
to
would
add.
say one thing Sarah and I noticed for sure is even like 3 years ago when we were at the beginning of this journey, you would ask the average person, do you think our relationship with our phone is at the root of a lot of our problems? Or do you believe that it's one of the main crises that we have to face? They would say, I get it. I think the phone's toxic, this and that, but I don't know if it's that deep. 3 years later, you ask the average person, yes, when is this film coming out? I've been worrying about this. I've been having these conversations with my friends. What do we do next, right? So already just in the experience of making the film, we've seen this shift in public sentiment that's in a lot of ways encouraging. And I think people are really open to the ideas that we're trying to put forward in this movie. I think also, in these screenings where we would have a range of anyone from 18 years old up to 60 years old, we noticed that Gen Z was reacting to the film in a way that was like, you know, I knew that I knew people were kind of like getting dumb phones and being Luddites and doing things, but seeing the offline club actually kind of made it seem cool. And there's something there where it's like this simplicity of modeling behavior. One of the aspects of this movement is that until we show people, a way that doing something different can look cool and be something where you can see yourself in it, people are just not going to want to change culturally. So I think a lot of people watching the film are like, yeah, I was surprised to see such normal, interesting people all hanging out without their phones, like the Renaissance or something, or like the Enlightenment period. Like, I kind of want to start an offline club in my community now. And I think, yeah, that was definitely encouraging. That was what we were hoping for, but it's a different thing to get that reaction firsthand.
When I think of your film, there are three dates, and Sarah, you mentioned one of them, or periods of time that really stuck out for me. The 2009 when the like button is designed, I believe first by somebody at Facebook, but then also January of 2024 when Zuckerberg and the head of Snapchat and I think TikTok and I know I'm missing somebody.
Discourse and yeah.
X, yeah.
They're called before Congress, and Josh Hawley really lays into Zuckerberg. But then a year later, Zuckerberg and the other titans of tech are at the Trump inauguration in January 2025, seated right behind the cabinet members, very purposefully, almost announcing that you guys had your opportunity to tame tech. We're going to let them run wild, essentially. So as sort of a barometer of at least the political and corporate tenor of the times, those three events really stood out to me. But I do want to go back to the emergence of the like button. And Sarah, you mentioned it, but let's just talk about it a little bit more. How did that really change the nature of engagement, not just on Facebook, but that, of course, migrated to the other social media apps? And what is the difference between sharing my personal, as you said, Sarah, kind of online diary entries with almost being forced to be performative and therefore circumspect about what I present and how I present it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just said it. That's the big shift, right? That instead of going online to just express who we are and experiment and try things out, we now get immediate feedback, and we get feedback in a quantified kind of way. And the brutal thing about quantification is that you have a very clear comparison, right? There is no question, is my blog doing better than yours? When you bring it down to a number, you have one indicator that kind of can't be argued with. And I think that is really, that gives rise to a lot of comparison. I saw that happening in my school, actually. I went to an alternative school. I went to a Waldorf school, and we didn't have grades until ninth grade. And when those grades came into the classroom, the whole atmosphere in the classroom shifted to something a lot more competitive.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that like button pop up, I was like, oh, that's the same thing, right? We're doing that again. Now we're doing that to our friendships. Like enlarge in a space that friendships shouldn't be competitive. Like the whole idea of friendship is actually that it's not competitive, right?
Yes.
So you introduce that element into something that's supposed to be the opposite, supposed to be supportive, supposed to be meaningful intrinsically, not because it has some ulterior value. So I think it's actually a really profound shift of how we perceive of ourselves and our value in a social setting. And I think a lot of the costs we're seeing, loneliness and so forth, sure, you can say that's because people spend less time face to face, but I think there's also an underlying factor here that we've actually changed the whole perception of what it means to be human and what it means to be with each other.
Yeah, like we've really shifted value in a lived way. And like I would just flash back to the hike I was speaking about earlier. I started it with Instagram as a way to show my friends and family, look at these amazing experiences and these mountaintops and all these things. Very quickly, though, you find yourself hiking along in America's great forests, having a once in a lifetime experience. And the first thought that comes to your mind is, would that be a great photo? And who would comment on it, right? And once that sort of is that deep in your experience as a human, where you have a beautiful experience and you can't actually have it yourself first because your first thought is how to frame it for others, you've got a problem. So I believe
it's like, is this happening? If it's not happening on Instagram, is it
exactly.
real? Is it valid?
Exactly. So I mean that type of thinking has become so deep. And then, Sherry Turkle speaks a lot about this, about identity. But, we used to spend all these like in between moments when we weren't engaged with each other and we weren't sort of sharing with each other. We would go back to the default mode network in our brain. We would go back to this place of, when you're bored, when you're just like daydreaming, watching birds, that's when you're formulating the continuity of your life. You're kind of stitching together memory. You're piecing together what you care about. And if you're crowding out all of that time that your brain needs to sort of process who you are with how do other people perceive me and how do I, do better with that, you're going to sort of find this growing emptiness inside of you, which we've seen now with the, especially the younger generation of why do I feel so purposeless, so disconnected, so, adrift. That is a direct product of this digital landscape that we are forcing people into.
Yeah, one of the participants in your film, Matt Miles, says social media is not really social. It's more like a social capital measuring machine. And I thought that was so spot on. And that measuring machine takes its toll for different individuals in different ways. And your film goes into the tragic story of a young man named Carson Bride. Sarah, can you give us the parameters of that story, please?
Yes. So we in Your Attention Please, we follow Kristen Bride. She's our main story thread throughout the film. And in 2020, her son Carson Bride was cyberbullied for weeks on an anonymous app called YOLO that used to be at the back end of Snapchat. So Kristen and her husband Tom were actually very careful around technology use. They had a lot of conversations with Carson and his older brother. And Carson really had to beg to get Snapchat, and it really was only happening because that's how all of his friends were connecting, and he was the one that was left out without it. So there was huge social pressure to get that app. And Kristen didn't know that at the back end of that app was an anonymous messaging app.
So explain what that means. An anonymous messaging app means what?
It means that you can write messages without having to disclose your identity.
Okay, yeah.
But the identity, that's where it gets really kind of convoluted and quite absurd, but you know the identity of the person you're talking to oftentimes. So people will disclose their identity, but then they get anonymous comments from others in the room and they don't know who they are. So of course, if you imagine something like that, that just invites cruelty, right? Because you can get away with it. And we're talking about 15, 16-year-old boys who are, trying to figure out where they are in the social pecking order. So you can just imagine that leads to a lot of cyberbullying, and it historically always has with anonymous apps. And if had Kristen known that there was an anonymous app on there, she probably wouldn't have allowed it, but she didn't even know because it was just came with the app package. And so unbeknownst to the parents, cyberbullying happened for weeks on end, oftentimes late into the night. That's one of the problems with cyberbullying is it follows you into your bedroom. It follows you everywhere.
Yeah.
And by all external markers, Carson was doing great. He just got his first summer job. He had written his schedule. Kristen talks about this, like he's written a schedule on, downstairs in the kitchen, his work schedule. And it was just seemingly, he was thriving. And one night it got so bad he decided to take his own life. Did it right then. Parents had no idea that any of that was happening and found out the next morning. And at that point, they were not aware of any of the cyberbullying that had happened. They found out weeks later, due to a tip from one of the classmates that had witnessed it. And at that point, they then looked at his phone and discovered what had happened.
And when they looked at his phone, did they see the whole litany of commentary and feedback?
Yes, they did. And, the first thing Kristen did at that point was reach out to YOLO and said, look, you have a policy, because YOLO did. They actually had a pop-up window that said, we're monitoring for cyberbullying, and we, if anyone violates that policy, we will disclose their identity. So she reached out to YOLO in good faith and was like, here's what happened, just so you know, could you please disclose the identity of those people who did that so it doesn't happen again? And also, this happened on your app, just so you're aware. And she didn't hear back, and she reached out 3 more times and she never heard back. And at that point, she was like, okay, something needs to be done. So she filed a lawsuit, and then she went on to speak to Congress about it, because her lawsuit was dismissed due to Section 230. So she had the experience that a lot of parents in this situation have, which is initially you don't hear back from these apps when you file the most serious claim that you could possibly let them know. They just don't respond. And then when you file a lawsuit, it gets dismissed because of Section 230 immunity.
Yeah, let's talk about Section 230 for a bit. So Section 230 is part of a 1996 law, the Communications Decency Act. It was signed by then President Bill Clinton, and its original intent was actually sort of benevolent, I guess, in terms of what was going to be perceived as the beneficial growth of the internet for all parties involved. But Jack, maybe you could help us unpack that a bit in terms of what Section 230 covers, and how cover couldn't be a more apt word, because the tech companies use it now as a shield. Talk to me about the evolution of that.
Yes. Well, great point that you make there. Originally Section 230 was about protecting free speech. It was, a publisher of content cannot be held liable for that content, basically. So you're not going to go after publishers if someone on your site is a lunatic and goes off and says crazy stuff, right? You can ask that publisher to take down that content or ban them, but you can't hold the publisher liable. And that did sort of embolden the internet to grow fast and become a landscape of diverse opinions. So in a way, the spirit of Section 230 was good for the internet at that time. We have a much different internet now. So as we cover in the film, and as Tristan Harris and other tech experts help us understand, we're no longer looking at an internet that's basically a bulletin board that's just like an equal priority. Everybody just puts up their content, and you can decide what you want to see by seeking it out as the user. What we have is an extremely curated internet where the platforms are studying every minute detail of how we use the internet and trying to then decide exactly what comes next. So if you are scrolling and you linger for 1.2 seconds instead of 1.7 seconds, that's going to then influence what you see 3 posts down the line, and so on. So as you can see, this really cascades into a tremendous amount of responsibility on the part of the tech companies, where, it's not this innocent thing of like, well, people were looking for, this negative content and then they got what they were looking for. It's more along the lines of, if you go on and you're like, I don't know, I want to get in shape, let me look at how to do some jumping jacks. You're going to slowly find that the algorithm is pushing you away from jumping jacks toward how to have sort of this really low body fat content. And then from there, if you really engage with that, it's going to start pushing you toward, how to start shaming people in your life that are eating too much. And right. So it's this weird system that sort of lazy river rides you further and further into the more extreme version of what you were originally looking for. And I think we've all felt that to some extent. We all feel that pull of the algorithm kind of giving us not really what we were looking for, but sometimes they make it so irresistible And it's all very carefully, designed and A/B tested to do this. The way that the thumbnails look, the way that the content plays, as you notice, they started just like automatically playing audio. They started putting captions on. It's like whatever they can do to make it so you can't avoid and go to the next thing you're actually trying to do. They want you to stop here and look here now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now with that type of responsibility, Section 230 is really inadequate to sort of hold them to account when they are pushing unhealthy things on all of us.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the algorithm, and it's funny, the algorithm has become, I feel like, one of those words where we hear it all the time, but most people, and I myself forget from time to time, what the hell does that mean? The algorithm. It's essentially, and I'm sure all of the techies are going to be holding their ears when I give you my layman's interpretation, but essentially, it sort of means that what's the recipe for keeping this sticky? Keeping this addictive? Like, what does this user need to see next to not leave the platform?
Yes, that's a great way of putting it. I think, it's the algorithms weren't nearly this good 10 years ago when they came out. And the reason they've become so refined and so good is machine learning, is essentially, a similar thing to what is making AI so powerful. It's the ability to observe across thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of users, and to then aggregate that data and be like, we've realized that when we make these minute, small design changes and A/B test them, it increases the amount people are looking by 1 second on this type of content. And that's an oversimplification, but I think, I don't know, Sarah, what would you be your summary of the algorithm?
I think you said it well. It is basically a system that decides, based on its goals, what to show you next. And currently, the goals are to keep us engaged for as long as possible, as often as possible. You could easily conceive of changing those goals to maybe show you content that is the most helpful to you. Or at a certain point, show you content that actually encourages you to get off the app and, pursue something in the real world. So an algorithm, I think, has become kind of this almost sinister term in our day and age, but it doesn't need to be.
Yes.
It's just a calculation of what to show you next.
So I want to pick up on Section 230 again, just for a moment, because Jack, you kind of led us up to a point where congressional hearings were taking place to re-examine and perhaps, alter Section 230. The mom of Carson Bride testifies, along with many others, before Congress. And this bill passes the Senate. I think it was 91-3 or 93-3 or something like that, overwhelming bipartisan support. And then it goes to the House. Now, between the time it was voted on in the Senate and it went to the House, there had been an election. There had been the election of Donald Trump, who was received a whole lot of tech money. Now, both parties receive a whole lot of tech money. So, there's incentives on both sides. And then it just languishes. And in your film, you have a clip of Mike Johnson being interviewed, kind of hiding behind the notion that we want to do this, but we want to do it slowly. Let's emphasize slowly, so that nobody's free speech is damaged. So here we are, X number of years down the road, and nothing's changed.
Well, I would say, in a way, the story in the film currently is maybe a little incomplete. And that's really because when we stopped editing, that's where it stood.
Right.
Now, if you're looking at the social media addiction verdicts that we had a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah.
I think yet again we're seeing a shift, right? I think we're seeing the pendulum swing back. Where now, for the first time, courts actually have held big tech, including Meta and YouTube/Google, liable for their addictive designs. So what we weren't able to do yet on the legislative front, we're actually now able to do in court. So even though you're completely right, we're seeing an alignment between administration and big tech to an extent that we haven't seen like that before. We're also seeing a really strong pushback. So I think it's an ongoing debate that is playing out here in real time. But I'm quite hopeful given the verdicts and given also the pushback on a more local level that we're seeing nationally with phone-free schools really taking off. And now I think the California school district, right, just said they're going to limit the amount of screen time.
Mm-hmm.
In schools, this includes personal devices. This includes looking at like what do kids actually do on their computers, and is less screen time maybe better for education? That's a huge change from where we've been heading. So I think there's a lot of reason for hope, and it also goes to show that this can be achieved even when we have an administration that gives big tech, kind of unprecedented free rein.
Sure. In your research and in your interviews, were you able to speak with people at any level of these companies, whether in the C-suites or, down in the trenches, the PR people, the folks that are paid to just tell you how Facebook is making the world a better place? Were you able to have conversations with them, and do they have a sense of the toll that their addictive technologies are taking?
Great question. And I would say off the record, many conversations, yes.
But they didn't want to go on the record.
We didn't particularly push for it
Okay.
in this film. We really focused our efforts on, the film was very much focused on people who are standing up to try to change this, who have made that their platform. That was our whole kind of framework for it. So we, in that sense, didn't pursue that. But I think there is awareness, and there's absolutely now rising awareness with AI, because I think it increasingly affects people at their workplace as well.
Sure.
So it's no longer a hypothetical impact, right? It's a felt impact.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I asked that question is, when the reform of Section 230 is sort of languishing, Carson's mom makes this comment saying that, the momentum feels good, but now the PR armies and the lobbyists are going to do their work. And $90 million was thrown at a lobbying effort to take the wind out of the sails of that legislative process. And those lobbyists are people. They're people with kids. The minions that spread the PR gospel of Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat and Facebook, they're people with kids. We can hop over to LinkedIn right now and see all their posts. And I wonder, will we ever get to a time where somebody is as reticent to say that, oh yeah, I'm I do PR for the tobacco companies. I do PR for, guns in school campaigns. When you're looking at similar social destructive fallout, does a grassroots movement of the type that you illustrate in your film require the comfortable middle class to become uncomfortable with the choices they're forcing upon their kids?
Absolutely. I would just quickly note that I came from a wedding in New York this weekend, and my friend is trying to work on policy at Anthropic. And funny enough, I felt like the energy in the room, the speeches from his parents and other folks were like, so proud of him working in, that industry we shall not name. And I thought, wow.
There's
just
a
year
tell.
or two ago, it wouldn't have been this sort of taboo to even mention AI or social media. So I do think that just signaled to me that there is, even among, the folks that are really for it and really trying to grow it, there's an awareness that it's problematic, and that we really have to figure out how to face this moment. I would say, I have a lot of friends in tech. There's so many people that I think what the Facebook files show in our film is that it's not this clear-cut picture of a bunch of people all sort of aligned internally at the tech companies with the same agenda. It's mostly people there that got into tech with this idealism of how to make the world better, how to connect people. And, they slowly watch their idealism sort of become irrelevant and somewhat challenged by the structures that are in place. And there's people that are trying to sort of raise the alarm a little bit and raise the flag inside, as the Facebook files show, saying, Mark, we don't agree with these decisions. We think that it's been pretty clear that these certain features are problematic for teen users. So we would recommend not proceeding. And a lot of times those people are sort of softly ignored, and the features are slowly reintroduced. So it is a complex picture, and there's a lot of good people inside tech that really want it to lead to a better outcome for humanity. I think you have a great point there, that I think there does need to be this sense in which it's no longer a neutral thing to say that you're doing PR for Meta and that's just this great thing, right?
Absolutely.
I think that,
Or do
yeah,
your PR for Meta, but don't tell me you pretend to love kids.
right, exactly.
And I think that sort of insider's view, someone who enters with a idealistic frame of mind and hopefulness around what social media might be able to do, is perfectly encapsulated in one of the participants in your film, the story of Frances Haugen. Sarah, can you talk to me just a little bit about what you found to be so extraordinary about the steps that she took?
Yeah, so Frances Haugen, first off, part of the reason that we put her in the film was that I realized a lot of people still don't know who she is. And given what she has done, that is kind of extraordinary. She absolutely is, I think, an American hero, and we should celebrate her as such. And somehow, we know some names. We know, Julian Assange. We just watched a great film about him. Edward Snowden. I think Frances Haugen belongs in that list. And yet there's much less awareness of her. And I think partially because she went up against Meta, and they did what they could to prevent the news from going out. Frances Haugen, came to Meta to look at algorithms particularly. And I'm going to abbreviate it here, there's so much we can say, but she flagged concerns early on about violence in countries around the world, especially like vulnerable countries, and Facebook at the time was Facebook contributing to that due to a lot of factors, including a lack of fact checking, and she also so that was the initial thing that she was working on. And she found out pretty quickly that there wasn't an interest at Meta to really fix that issue. And it got to a point for her, there were many steps involved, but it got to a point for her where she realized they're not going to fix themselves. And so the public needs to know what Facebook knows, because a lot of that information is available only within the company. And is not being, because of a complete lack of transparency, is not being made available to any like third-party researchers. And the issue that ultimately caught people's attention were her disclosures around youth well-being, and especially the impact of Instagram on teen girls. Facebook had many studies that documented a negative impact, especially around things like self-image, self-worth, eating disorders. Her disclosures also, included a lot of other things, specifically around Facebook contributing to violent conflict around the world. But that teen girls' well-being issue was the one that actually, got attention broadly, especially here in the United States. And what she did was she spent weeks photographing internal documents. She couldn't screenshot them because, Facebook has technology where they can tell that you're screenshotting, and all of a sudden if all you're doing is screenshotting, they will flag it. So she had to photograph them.
Right.
And very systematically documented what she saw in the hope that her documents would tell a complete story so she could actually stay anonymous, and then had to find out pretty quickly that that was not an option.
Yeah, and relevant to that study that she referenced in the Facebook files, and these are from Meta's own study. And for folks listening, I'm sure folks know this, but just to underscore the fact that Meta owns Instagram and Facebook, along with WhatsApp, and I'm sure some other stuff that I'm forgetting. But according to Facebook's own internal study, this is a quote: "We make body image issues worse for 1 in 3 girls." Here's another one: "Teams blame Instagram for increases in a rate of anxiety and depression." This is in their own study. I know that you all, as I said earlier, were on the festival circuit and got a lot of great response on the festival circuit. Jack, can you talk to me a little bit about the Impact campaign that's associated with your film. I know your film's website is a vibrant resource of information that is covered in the film, and just one of those go offline initiatives that Sarah had mentioned. Folks can find out more about that. But talk to me about your impact campaign, if you would, what the objectives are, and the efforts that you all are making to make sure that this isn't sort of a one and done. The film's out in the world. We'll cross our fingers and hope people see it.
I think I'll let Sarah take this in a second because she can speak better to the impact campaign as a whole. I think we wanted to carry on the messages that you see inside the film into a way that you could continue to get involved in these things, right? So one is supporting legislative efforts, getting involved with phone-free school movement, figuring out how to plug into that. I think we wanted to provide resources for parents to be able to form coalitions and wait until 8th grade and figure out how to get resources to figure out how to navigate this as a community of parents rather than individual parents, sort of going against the tide. I think, we want to spread the idea of offline club and giving people this notion that you can be the sort of change maker in your community. You can, start something like this and start normalizing unplugging as a ritual with your friends, with your community. Yeah, I don't know, Sarah, fill me in a little bit on the extent of our impact campaign.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I think that's noteworthy about this film is in the process of making it, we spent so much time networking and connecting with many, many players in the field who are doing amazing work. So, everything that Jack mentioned and then some, there are so many great existing organizations out there, but I know it can be quite overwhelming to figure out where the resources are. If you're, for example, a parent and you're like, okay, I really need to think about how I handle screen time at home. You're already a parent, you already have a lot going on. And then on top of that, trying to find the resources can be challenging. So one thing that we're working on, we're going to call it the social reset. We're working on it together with the Institute for Families and Technology, and it's basically going to be a resource that we'll link on our website and it'll live in other places too, where people can just very easily search the kind of information they're looking for and then get some recommendations of here's some organizations that are working on that, right? And have a starting point. It'll also have some very simple boiled down actions that people can take right away just to try to simplify and remove that barrier to entry a bit because it can be quite overwhelming. And we recognize that. And then, we'll have a lot of community driven screenings coming up. So a ton of the orgs that we're in touch with are really interested to screen the film. So it'll become kind of a tool to bring communities who are already engaged and already working on this together and invite new members in. So I'm very excited for the film to become basically that calling card in a way, like that reason that people gather. And so I think it'll both like sustain and like help to energize the movement to keep going, which is really exciting.
And where should folks be going to find out, if the film is going to be shown in their community as part of your impact campaign?
Yes. So the best place right now is to go to our website. That's yourattentionplz.com. PLZ short for please. If you go to yourattentionplease.com, you end up somewhere else. So yourattentionplz.com. And sign up for our newsletter. That's how we will keep folks posted on everything that's going on. If you are on Instagram, you can follow us on Instagram. We are there just to help with visibility. One of the many ironies of our situation.
Well, it's an irony, but that's brought out in the film too, because I think one of the offline folks makes mention of that I posted about these offline meetings, but I think that what that does, it almost proves your point. It's like, it's not the technology that's evil or nefarious. It's the decisions being made around how do we monetize the technology? How do we monetize the captured attention? Those are choices that are made in boardrooms and that are made all the way down the line. We can make other choices.
I mean, you've seen how powerful this technology has been to organize us, to push us in this direction that we outline in the movie. We can also shift the incentives of this same technology landscape to help us tackle climate change, help us, heal division and political polarization, help us to look at the AI future and say what's an equitable and safe way we can deploy this, right? The same technology that has such a power to put us in echo chambers, isolate us, turn us into sort of scrolling dopamine junkies. It can do so many other things too. Yes. And I think that's to your point, like, let's force the people in charge to turn this powerful tech to our benefit, right?
And one final question. So we mentioned the festival circuit and the Impact campaign. Is there a future wherein your film will be available for streaming for folks that might not be able to catch it in either of the other settings?
Yes, we are hard at work to make that happen, and we're pushing right now for a release early September. So at the beginning of the new school year, hopefully, the film will be there.
And then just one closing comment. I mentioned this all to you before we started recording, but I want viewers to know, in addition to it being a vitally important film with compelling content, it is a really beautifully made film. And so I want to commend each of you on that achievement too, because you checked all the boxes. It's, it's beautiful looking and good for you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
I'll give Sarah a lot of credit for her patience in the edit suite and the thousands of hours we spent together, making decisions. I think it really paid off.
Yeah, it most definitely did pay off. SARA Robin and Jack LeMay, thank you both for your time, and thanks for this film.
Thank you, Michael.
Containers, maps, and mirrors hold of the human race, while the smartest minds on the planet have no human face. But we could feel there was something growing, cooling the angry heat. It was growing hearts and minds around the world that no army could defeat. 'Cause this is not the way we want to live, it's not the way it has to be. This is not the way we want to live, it's not the way it has to be. 'Cause we won't stand down till there's something better appearing on the ground. No, we won't stand down till the job is done. The job is done.